This, my friend, is a pint.
I can get you one.
As Pippin pointed out in the Fellowship of the Ring, this is a pint. A one-wheel pint. Not quite the same. These things are pretty hard to come by in New Zealand, as they are not allowed to be sold by retailers. But luckily, I know a guy. The first thing I wanted to do was to make a simple stand for it. I've seen quite a few designs online, but I wanted to try and come up with something different. Here I'm playing around with some scraps to see how it balances on 2 points of contact on the wheel, and I quite liked how the board sits on an angle, so I thought I would run on this idea. I found an offcut of birch plywood big enough and started cutting it down on the table saw. These were not to any specific dimensions, just whatever I thought would work. I can then trace the profile of the wheel onto the pieces that would be holding the pint using a small offcut as a scribe. Then I cut it out on a jigsaw and used that piece to trace the same profile onto the second piece. To clean up the cuts, I got out my spindle sander, which I hardly use, but is great for this kind of application. I can sand it down to get a nice clean curve, and I kept checking it against the wheel to make sure I was getting the profile right. Next, I gave all the pieces a quick sand and used my palm router to put a chamfer along all the edges. I'm using a biscuit joiner and glue as my method of assembly. This will give it plenty of strength, and I didn't want any screws to be visible. I'm doing a dry fit first to make sure I didn't make any mistakes and to see how it would hold the one wheel. I cut the sides at a 15-degree angle to give it a more interesting look, rather than keeping it square as it will look quite boxy. You'll also notice the two sides are slightly different heights to allow the pint to sit at the angle that I wanted. I then took it apart and put it back together, this time using glue, wiping off any excess between the joints. I used a clamp to apply just a little pressure while the glue dries. After the glue was set, I sanded down the edges and made sure the joints were flush. I still wasn't too happy with the design as it still looked quite boxy, so I decided to taper the sides to give it a sleeker look. This would have been a lot easier to do before gluing it together. I was able to use my crosscut sled and cut it on the table saw to get that taper. I marked out where I wanted the cut and lined it up by eye with the saw blade. I then had to match that angle with the saw blade and cut it along the bottom piece. Then I had to sand it down as the cuts didn't line up perfectly with each other. I then put a chamfer along the edges again. This small change made it look much better. I wanted to see how rough I could be when putting the pint onto the stand, as I wanted it to be easy to use and not have to worry about lining it up every time. Since it's resting on the wheel, I could almost drop it onto it without banging the board. It would sit in place pretty well each time thanks to the cutouts that match the profile of the wheel. The board itself is completely free to move around on the stand. I like how it gives a floating look, as this is how it makes you feel when you ride this thing. And now that the stand is done, it's time to do just that. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. I have a new website thanks to this clever tool, which has a ton of great templates to help get you started. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence. It also automatically scales your website to keep it looking clean and professional across all devices. Get 10% off your first website by visiting squarespace.com/theoffcut. Thanks for watching this video. Big shout out to those supporting me on Patreon. Check out the description box below where I have affiliate links, merch, Patreon, and social media accounts if you want to help support this channel.